It's time for episode 3 of our holiday special. In this one, we're taking a look at Yu-Gi-Oh! And what this game may bring over to Lorcana. And as always, enjoy, and everyone, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third of the holiday specials, this time covering the last of the current big three in TCGs, Yu-Gi-Oh! I am your host for today, Blake. I played a lot of this in my early childhood and when I first started getting into trading card games, but not so much recently. But we will go over the basics and see what we can glean from it, just to see what we want to happen for Lorcana, or more likely not happen for Lorcana. Just to get started with the basics of it, unlike most other TCGs, this Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not have a mana system or resource system like that. You usually can play your monsters out and just use their effects. Very similar turn layout to Magic the Gathering, where you have your draw phase, standby phase, where certain effects can go off, your main phase, where you play your monsters, spells, and traps, and then your battle phase. But kind of like the inverse of Magic, you cannot do anything directly to your opponent until their board is clear of their monsters. And that's the only way you can do direct damage. And then you have your second main phase to do any other monster plays or anything like that, and then you end your turn. And as opposed to, say, like Pokemon, there is a ton of interaction on turns. There are certain spell type cards that you can play at almost any point, and then you can create these ridiculous chains where you got 5+ cards reacting to each other and creating chain effects. And then there's just a bunch of effects on cards. If you have seen any Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards these days, there's at least a paragraph or two at minimum about what the card does. And all of these interact in some ways, and sometimes you can just be sitting for several minutes waiting for a turn to play out because your opponent is chaining all these different effects. And then for their competitive scene, they have their YCS, which is Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series. These are kind of standalone events, but they are pretty much the biggest events in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where a bunch of players come together and just play it out. And then on their truly competitive sides, you have your standard progression from regionals, nationals, up to worlds, and basically playing for your invite and trying to get into those higher ranks. But that's pretty much the basics of it. Is there anything else that we want to add to that about what we want to see from Lorcana or not see?
So one of the big things in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the extra deck, right? Can you explain that?
Yes. The extra deck is a deck that is separate from your other deck, where these are usually different monster cards that are able to be summoned depending on their criteria, and these are the fusion monsters from the days of old.
Okay, so the extra deck, you got extra cards that aren't in your deck that you can bring in based on stuff that happens according to whatever the card says.
Yeah. One other thing I forgot to mention, unlike a rotating format, this is usually a tradition with Bandai trading card games, is they have an eternal format where, as opposed to rotating sets every so often, basically every card is pretty much legal, and you work off of a ban list where they ban or limit certain cards. So famous example is Pot of Greed. That is on the limited list, I believe, currently.
I really hope that cards are never get anywhere near as complicated as Yu-Gi-Oh cards, because those walls of text are intimidating, even for a Magic player, man. Those are intimidating.
Yeah, I can definitely agree. Like, I just looked up what a Yu-Gi-Oh card looks like, and like, I don't want to play a game where I have to read a whole paragraph. And that's why I think Pokemon is so easy because like it's just a short attack, and it's like, okay, this does this. And I think Lorcana, like, they don't have paragraphs on their cards, so if those come, that's gonna be something interesting to see. But I don't think it will. So that's like the one thing that I don't want to see in the game.
From my understanding, like Yu-Gi-Oh at one point in time had to completely revamp how the game was played, which is where the extra deck and whatnot came into, because they realized that they had like designed themselves into a hole of like how the game played originally. So like if you played like me back in like set 1 and 2 in early 2000s, um the game doesn't play like that anymore. And uh now it's just crazy. Like I hadn't looked at Yu-Gi-Oh in 15 years at all. And then once I've been getting into, Lorcana and stuff, things have been popping up on my YouTube, and I'll see these clips of people literally on the first turn of the game, player 1 draw their entire deck, play out some insane combo, and win the game before the second player even takes a turn. And if that's like the state of the game, that's terrible. Like, I'm just going to straight up say it. That's terrible. And I don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried to get back into it when they came out with their online client with their new game that you can play it, and that was my experience. I loved the elemental heroes back in the day, and I was like, "Oh, I'll make an elemental hero deck," and I quickly learned this that does not stand up to what these new cards can do. Uh, but I will say one of the things that they do get right is supporting their different tribal sort of cards and just building on top of that throughout the sets. So if you have a particular set of characters or cards that you like, they you'll get more of those cards down the road, and it won't be something that's long forgotten.
For any of our Yu-Gi-Oh fans that are listening, please, if we are way off base, correct us. But just none of us are really into the game at the moment. From everything we've seen, it just looks really, really off-putting. So please reach out to us on, Twitter or any of our other socials. And if you've got some good things to say about Yu-Gi-Oh, let us hear it, because we haven't heard them. So
I will say that I have picked up a Blue Eyes White Dragon in my life. I have picked up that card before.
I've owned that.
That card is trash now. That's an old
Card was trash in set
trash
1.
card now. It's
It was always a trash.
yep. Interesting you bring that up. One of the other things when I was looking into it, the high concern for when Yu-Gi-Oh first started, it was mainly the show that was keeping it running, but the actual card game, the first few sets were just overflowing with vanilla monsters, which vanilla card, for those who don't know, is basically you have your character with your attack and defense, but it has no effects on it at all. So that's one of my main things is hopefully there aren't too many of those kind of cards for Lorcana, unless there is something built around that benefits those cards. All right. This was our holiday special on Yu-Gi-Oh! We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you all have a great holiday.
Thanks for listening, everyone. The next 2 episodes were released after the holiday weekend. We have Digimon, My Hero Academia, and the digital TCGs lined up. So get ready for those and have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone, and Glimmer on.